Hey guys! How are all of you beautiful people doing? I hope you all are having a great day. And yes, this is the next part of I Became Shikamaru Nara, where the world that once seemed fictional is now real. Shinobi, chakra. It's all so close. After being reborn in the body of a deceased child, the hero has a second chance to live this life anew. Having found a new home and clan, he will have a long and difficult journey. But the object that was found in the past and changed his fate is still with him. Now, with this power, he will follow the path of the strongest Shinobi. So without any delay, let's start the series. All this time, Raizeenn did not take his eyes off the crystal ball in front of him, carefully watching Naruto. He was really serious now. Although he did not interfere all this time, but Shikamaru's actions worried him, especially now, after what he had heard. The fact that he knew much more than a child usually was already clear for a long time. Raizeenn really liked this trait of his new student. He accumulated knowledge and knew how to dispose of it. According to the old man, this was one of the most important features of the future Hokage. Strong, not boastful, not withdrawn and quite serious, and most importantly, he knew when to stop and retreat. The question was, what is he willing to do for the sake of knowledge? Raizeenn was interested in this as much as Shikamaru's relationship to the village and the clan, or rather the main thing for him of the two. What secrets the boy possessed is not important. What matters is whether he will be ready to fight for the village and what it will become under his rule. Will he be like Dan's or Orochimaru? This is exactly what Raizeenn could not allow. Now the old man did not understand what this guy was trying to achieve with his actions. Why did he get involved in this story with the young Jinchuriki? It was difficult for Raizeenn to understand how much this guy knew, but definitely a lot, and this prompted questions. The Hokage has already tried to find out everything from him more than once, but the guy is too smart and easily finds excuses to avoid the topic. But he has not yet started a conversation about the situation with Naruto. He had doubts. But today they were dispelled. He clearly knew something. If Shikamaru started a topic about the boy's parents, then he most likely did not lie and could confirm his own words. The problem is that there are not so many who know about the son of Kushina and Minato. So how does he know? Crossing his fingers, Raizeenn narrowed his eyes. It looks like Naruto already knows something. Has he already said something to him? Raizeenn was worried about the situation. If Shikamaru knows the truth about that day and Naruto hears about it, it could end badly. The question is not whether Shikamaru knows the truth about the boy's parents or will tell it, but what Naruto will do. Raizeenn wanted to tell the child the truth about who his parents were and what they had done 100 times. But he could not. Children are too talkative and Naruto could well call trouble on himself knowing the truth. From this knowledge, everything can only get worse. He's not strong enough yet. Once he divulges this secret, something unpleasant can happen. It has the 9 tails in it, which complicates things even more. This is what worried Raizeenn. What does Shikamaru intend to do? He is not stupid and should know the reason for hiding the truth. If he knows it, then what will he do? Is it possible that the threat to Naruto doesn't bother him? Raizeenn didn't believe it. Naruto is very important to the village because of his simple desire to open the barrier. Shikamaru would not have done so stupidly. Should I interfere? The Hokage became thoughtful. He could well decide everything. The orders of the Hokage are not discussed. But Raizeenn is used to not interfering, and now the situation is still completely incomprehensible. There is a risk, but he believed in Shikamaru. If he got to know his student well enough, he would not do such a stupid thing. If he does, then nothing can be done about it. Raizeenn let out a long sigh and continued to stare into the crystal ball. Just at that moment, the guys crossed the first barrier, and Raizeenn continued to look gloomily. In the past, the Hokage never attempted to break this barrier, although he had some desires. He was undoubtedly interested in what was stored there. All he knew was the connection of that place with Mito Uzumaki. Yet once upon a time that place belonged to her. But, the third made a promise to Minato and Kushina. Therefore, he forbade anyone to try to break the barrier. But, he could not keep Uzumaki there either. Hinder Naruto. It was getting late. It looks like this is what Shikamaru was trying to achieve. Now, the guy wanted to reach that place with Naruto's support. As a result, the barrier will not be broken, which means he did not go against Raizeen's promise. Damn boy, I definitely have to talk to him about this. Raizeenn chuckled inwardly. Shikamaru and Naruto crossed the first barrier. Surprisingly, Naruto was able to get through even with his strength. This meant that it was somewhat similar to the second barrier, only with fewer restrictions and a larger size. Further, without slowing down at all, the two reached the second barrier, the one that surrounded the small residence. Naruto was visibly surprised when he saw such a whole house among these ruins. Shikamaru already understood a little more and could make out a lot of fuin seals, almost all over the house. There was a high probability that the safety of the house was just their merit. Coming close to the barrier, Shikamaru thought again. Although he planned to use Naruto for the passage, how to do it was already a completely different question. It was impossible to calculate it, all he could do was to guess and try already on the spot. While Shikamaru scowled at the barrier, Naruto walked slowly towards him. Now what? Why are we standing? I told you, there is a barrier. Naruto scratched his head and chuckled, you didn't say. Shikamaru shrugged. But now I speak. Try to get through. Naruto nodded quickly and took a few steps towards the barely perceptible barrier. Shikamaru watched him intently. When the blonde touched barely perceptible matter, he calmly was able to go further, feeling only a barely noticeable resistance. Seeing this sight, Shikamaru was pleased but at the same time frowned seriously. If Naruto could get through, that's great, but what next? I'll try to touch him. Nodding to his thoughts, Shikamaru said. Try again, only with me. With you? Naruto asked in surprise, why? Can't you get through? Shikamaru chuckled. As you can see, otherwise I would not have called you. So that's why I needed to train. You're right, Shikamaru nodded. But that's not just why. Workout and strength never hurts. Here I need your assistance. Who knows what is hidden inside, so I would not advise you to go alone. Of course, Shikamaru was sure there weren't likely to be traps inside. Still, it would be strange. Now, if they were activated after the destruction of the barrier, it would be quite real. Now, Naruto did not go through by force, and if his mother installed him, then Shikamaru was simply sure that there could be no traps there. But, Naruto had to be warned, otherwise Shikamaru's plan might not have worked and he might not have been able to get through. Naruto is quite capable of doing something stupid. Although he trusted the boy a little and knew that he would cheat him, it was still worth it to play it safe. After Shikamaru's words, Naruto nodded and quickly walked outside, feeling light pressure all over his body again as he touched the barrier. A strange wave seemed to pass through his body, and then immediately receded. The feeling was a little odd, but Naruto didn't even think about it. In his opinion, everything was as it should be, because this is the first time he encountered such a thing. In part, he was right. This barrier tested his relationship with its creator. The Uzumaki were very adept at this kind of barrier ninjutsu. Shikamaru grabbed his friend's shoulder, and then they slowly walked towards the barrier. When the moment finally came to touch him, Shikamaru exhaled and took a step forward, right after Naruto. He immediately felt pressure, as if something were pushing him out, not allowing him to enter. But, unlike the last time, he was not pushed out immediately, and he was not harmed. He was advancing. Probably, the one who is able to cross the barrier can lead someone nearby. Even though he will have to face difficulties. This worked into his hands. Shikamaru was already planning another option, but since everything worked, he clenched his teeth and continued to advance. It was much more difficult for him than for Naruto. In addition, he did not even imagine that he passed not only because of the guide in the person of a young Jinchuriki, but also due to the possession of the Uzumaki lineage. If he did not possess her, even Naruto's help would not have solved anything. If you are here Raizeenn and try to use the same method, although he will not be repelled, he simply cannot squeeze through due to the pressure. Of course, the old man can destroy it in a different way. 10 seconds later, Shikamaru was able to cross this invisible wall and could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The progress was quite difficult, his face was even slightly sweaty. Catching his breath, the guy immediately took out a cigarette. At that moment, Naruto asked, "What now?" Shikamaru breathed out the smoke in relief and said, "Let's go look for something. Follow me." With a wave of his hand, Shikamaru stepped forward. "Walk alongside and don't go far." Naruto nodded quickly and followed. At the same time, Raizeenn was sitting by the crystal ball and frowning. He still managed to get through, although the Hokage didn't like it. He continued to watch. He, like Shikamaru, was sure that there shouldn't be any traps, so he didn't worry too much. But, with Shikamaru's abilities, even if they are, he still has to avoid them, or at least see them. At least Raizeenn hoped so. These two were important to him. Shikamaru moved slowly. He activated the Sharingan and looked around without turning to Naruto. He didn't want the boy to see his eyes, so he tried to keep him at a distance. Naruto was in no hurry to approach and himself looked around with curiosity. It was the first time he had gone this far from home. It seemed to him as if he had left the village and embarked on an adventure. The barrier was located almost 20 meters from the house, so the path was not long, but not short either. At a slow pace, both approached several flower beds, with already wilted plants. All the way Shikamaru noticed Fuin seals. They were very small, but they could not hide from the Sharingan. Chakra slipped into them, but since Shikamaru did not understand Fuinjutsu at all, he did not know the purpose of these seals. Therefore, I tried to avoid them. Climbing a small ladder of only 3 steps, Shikamaru stopped. Naruto also slowed down just a couple of steps from his friend. After examining everything with his Sharingan, Shikamaru deactivated the power of his eyes and calmly reached out his hand to the doorknob. It was a little dusty, but the guy didn't care much. He just turned it and the door creaked open. Then, Shikamaru opened it completely and entered, Naruto not falling behind. Walking across the dusty floor, the guys found themselves in a small room. Apparently, it was a hallway. There was a small closet next to the entrance, which still had clothes and shoes on it. But, like everything around them, time did not spare them. Shikamaru smiled and thought, "It's strange why the original story didn't have all of this. I don't know anything about this guy's legacy. Was it or not?" As Shikamaru looked around, Naruto picked up someone's tattered sandals and blew off the dust, immediately picking it up all over the place. Shikamaru coughed and folded the seal. "Naruto, close your eyes." Then shouted, "Expand." At the same moment, the chakra of the elements of the wind went out, raising a large cloud of dust. But Shikamaru did not stop there. When everything around was clouded with impenetrable grayness, the guy folded another series of seals and quickly moved towards Naruto. "Ah!" The guy screamed in surprise, but Shikamaru deftly pressed him against the wall and folded a couple more seals. "It's me, Naruto, don't shout." When the young Jinchuriki calmed down, Shikamaru finally continued, freeing his hand. After folding 3 more hand seals, he injected his chakra into Naruto's body. At the same moment at the Hokage residence, Raizeen's Sha suddenly lost contact with the Jinchuriki, and a grey haze completely blocked his view. Naturally, Raizeen noticed this immediately and became worried. Shikamaru seized the moment deftly. The dust blocked the view of everyone and the Hokage, including, and since the jutsu needed direct contact with Naruto to perform the jutsu, it was the perfect moment to act without the old man noticing. He would probably guess, but Shikamaru wasn't worried about it at all. Without proof, questions are useless. The dust was still circling madly, but when Shikamaru solved one problem, he quickly got rid of that too, by directing the wind towards the exit. The dust quickly left the room, not a grain remained. The place was again as clean as it once was. True, not a trace remained of the past order, things were scattered everywhere. Shikamaru didn't care anymore, he walked away from Naruto and went to another room. He didn't know what Raizeen would do, but the old man might well have a way to get rid of Shikamaru's blockage. He would have gotten rid of it anyway, but according to the guy's calculations, it would take almost half an hour, which could be enough for everything for the eyes. Therefore, he did not hesitate and immediately began searching for books and various records. Shikamaru frowned more and more as he passed from room to room. It was an ordinary house, save for a lot of dust and a foul smell. Otherwise, there was nothing interesting. He even went up to the second floor and checked the rooms there, even the office, and he checked, but nothing. All the books he could find were useless. There was nothing in them about Fuinjutsu, and indeed about any things related to ninja. Shikamaru usually flipped through them using the Sharingan, but even so he could not grasp the details. He already had a plan to seal the items that he would take out, but now, apparently, there will be nothing to take out. It was completely empty. On the second floor of the residence, Shikamaru scowled through the bookshelves, dusting off every book he came across. Scrolling through them over and over again, he shook his head in disappointment and tossed them aside. A whole bunch of them had already accumulated in the corner, but Shikamaru stubbornly continued to search. At the same time, a couple of his clones searched the house for oddities. Naruto at that moment also wandered around the house with curiosity, inspecting the situation. Unfortunately, he couldn't find anything worthwhile. There were no photographs, no reminders of the past owners of the house, nothing at all. Looking around place after place, he became more and more disappointed that he and Shikamaru looked like, although they were looking for different things. Although some were not completely disappointed, but rather very nervous and worried. In the Hokage's office, a grey-haired old man walked from side to side and frowned with displeasure. This is a blocking method. Was there a protection there? But there should be no traps. Perhaps an additional barrier was activated, not allowing me to pass. Maybe this is all Shikamaru. This sly man guessed the right moment. Raizeenn sighed and threw another worried glance at the muddy crystal ball. He tried all known countermeasures. But it didn't work. As if someone specifically used the transmission blocking technique. Raizeenn was almost 60% sure that this was the work of Shikamaru. The guy was clearly trying to prevent Raizeenn from knowing what was happening inside. It was quite arrogant and presumptuous of him. But at the same time, Raizeenn could not help but praise his skills. The blocking method is not something simple, and it is quite impressive to perform such a technique at the right time. Although, he did not expect less from him. It just upset him that even his own student was trying to hide something from him. But even if the ability to see was cancelled, the telescope technique still had some ability. Raizeenn independently invented this method. Its effect was very simple, it could roughly determine the state of the person being monitored. But, approximately, still not enough. It was only possible to determine whether the object is alive and whether it is in critical condition. More precisely, how his chakra behaves. If it is not enough, or vice versa, a lot, the technique is to determine. Which naturally allows us to draw some conclusions. That is why Raizeenn was not particularly worried. Naruto was fine, his huge chakra reserves hadn't changed much. Of course, he could have been under genjutsu, which the Hokage would not have been able to verify for sure, but the guy was definitely alive and definitely not wounded, at least not seriously. As for Shikamaru, Raizeenn could not draw conclusions. But even if he was worried, he decided to give them time. If they do not return within an hour, he will definitely take action, or if Naruto's state changes. The promises were important, but the lives of the villagers are much greater. Deciding on this, Raizeenn sat back down at the table and tried to dispel the blockage again. Naturally, this was almost impossible. Shikamaru injected his chakra into Naruto's body and changed some of the chakra features of the guy, which meant that the main advantage of the technique was impossible to apply. While the shadow clones of Shikamaru scoured the old house. Calmly wondering, Naruto looked around with interest, trying to find at least something. He knew that Shikamaru was looking for something, but he did not say a word, but simply left him alone. From the hallway there were two rooms, one to the left leading to the kitchen, and the one to the right leading to the main hall. Further down the hallway was a staircase leading to the second floor, which contained only 3 rooms and a small staircase to the attic. Right there, Shikamaru's clones were combing everything, and he sent another down. Naruto walked down the stairs to the closet where one of Shikamaru's clones was now trapping. When both met, the clone nodded to the blonde and continued to examine the boxes filled with various junk. Naruto briefly watched this when he suddenly saw something and abruptly walked over to one of the boxes. Right there, at the very top, there was a photo frame, all dusty, but Naruto quickly brushed it off and looked closely. Shikamaru, look. The clone turned around and glanced at the keen blonde, who was examining something unusual. Shikamaru immediately noticed in his hands a frame with a photograph showing 2 people in the background of an autumn forest. On the left stood a tall, dark-haired man in red armor from the Warring States era, with a leaf protector on his forehead. Hashirama was hard not to recognize. Shikamaru had seen his face on more than one occasion in Raizeen's office. True, he was very serious there, but here he looked rather happy and carefree. It's hard to believe that this is the same great Shinobi god who went through 100 battles and one of the founders of the Hidden Leaf Village. Founder of the Will of Fire. The first Hokage gently hugged the short young girl around the waist. Her appearance was quite attractive, especially her red hair, tied in 2 buns, pinned up with hairpins, to which were tied a pair of funny seals. It was definitely Mito Uzumaki. Shikamaru could not confuse her. Although in this life he did not see her even in photographs, it was not difficult to establish the identity of the one whom Hashirama could hug in this way. It was definitely her, his wife. At least her looks and white high-collar kimono were proof enough, not to mention everything else. This is how she appeared in Shikamaru's thoughts from the memories of her past life. Memories that slowly become a thing of the past and become almost a dream. Watching Naruto staring at the photo with interest, Shikamaru sighed and said, "This is the first Hokage." Hokage. Naruto looked up in surprise. "How do you know? Is this his home?" "But, you said." "Be quiet, take your time." Shikamaru waved his hand and continued checking various boxes. This time he was lucky and was able to find some Fuin seals, very old seals. "Put a dozen of them aside," he continued. "This is not the house of the first, you are not related to him. At least not in blood." At this moment Shikamaru grinned and put several surviving seals in his pocket. "Well, this house belonged to the woman next to him." And she?" Naruto looked at the photo again. Shikamaru explained. "She's your relative. It's hard to say how far away, though. But, you are from the same clan." "Well, you would if he still existed." Naruto looked up sharply. "Was there?" "What do you mean?" Shikamaru rubbed his head and thought irritably. "Oh, he's so chatty, shit, and why did the original make me babysit him?" Exhaling, Shikamaru shook his head. "You are Uzumaki." "I heard." Shikamaru slowly spelled Uzumaki, then looked into Naruto's confused eyes and said, "Information about your clan is not hidden. Maybe they stopped talking about it, but... it doesn't matter. Let's just say you, Naruto, are one of the few existing descendants of Uzumaki, a long-vanished clan. Even during your mother's childhood, the Uzumaki clan was almost completely massacred. It was a very long time ago, and I know little of the details. Even Old Man 3 didn't tell me much about those times. For details, contact Iruka-sensei, he will tell you more." With a wave of his hand and leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts, Shikamaru continued his search. Naruto arrived in a strange state. Lowering his head, the boy sighed. He suddenly felt very sad. A new wave of sadness swept in. Cut out. The whole clan. It turned out that not only mom and dad but even his clan no longer exists. He was all alone. For Naruto, the last months have been much better than before joining the academy. Then he felt terribly depressed and every day he experienced intense melancholy and loneliness. The nine-tailed fox sitting inside the boy only intensified these unpleasant feelings. He made the boy feel the hatred of those around him. I tried to suppress him and hurt him as much as possible. But, Naruto held on. All this resentment, loneliness and pain quickly turned into complexes, which he unconsciously tried to overcome. He wanted a family, he wanted recognition, and thus his desire to become Hokage was formed. For a boy who did not understand why he was treated this way, this was the only method. Naruto often felt angry, but unconsciously, he always calmed down. He was unforgiving and just tried to avoid trouble. After joining the academy and meeting Shikamaru shortly before, things changed a lot for Naruto. Before that, he tried to train, throw stones, run and pull up. But, he never observed the regime, did not have the correct technique and proper guidance. Therefore, his successes were not particularly outstanding. After meeting a new friend, everything changed. Of course, Shikamaru didn't give it to him on his own. He only gave the boy motivation, gave a goal to strive for. For a child burning out from loneliness, the desire to know at least the name of his parents, it was a ray of light. Then he met a new friend, Kji. He was also a friend of Shikamaru and, in contrast, quite helped Naruto with training. In many ways, this is thanks to that slightly lazy fat man Naruto learned so much so quickly. Of course, the boy's main goal has not changed. He still wanted recognition. He wanted adults who despise him to understand how wrong they were. Even after making friends, he still dreamed of becoming Hokage. Upon learning today that he had a clan that had long since disappeared, he felt bitter. He didn't know them, nobody. But, nevertheless, he was sad. It is sad to realize that in this world he no longer has a single relative. From the long and tense silence, Shikamaru turned his head and noticed Naruto's condition. The boy leaned his back against the wall and looked sadly at the photograph. At the sight, Shikamaru sighed and then shook his head and said, "Maybe your clan and Naruto disappeared, but in this world there are still Uzumaki besides you, you can believe me. Besides, a clan is a clan." Shikamaru smiled encouragingly. For the Hokage, the villagers are family, right? Naruto looked up in surprise, and noticing Shikamaru's smile, he even felt a little relieved. He began to understand his words about the village. At that moment, his dream of becoming Hokage was strengthened even more. Feeling that the guy felt better, Shikamaru continued his search. On the account was already the 10th box with various junk. Fortunately, there were many Fuin seals that survived here. At that moment, Naruto looked at the photo again and smiled sadly, after which he looked at Shikamaru's back. "Shikamaru. Millimeter." The guy turned his head and raised an eyebrow inquiringly. "What was her name?" Glancing at the photo, Shikamaru turned around again. After a moment, he replied, "Mito Uzumaki is the wife of the first Hokage and the first Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. They say she was a very strong and wise kunoichi. Sealing the Baija on your own is not an easy task. Unfortunately, as far as I know, the seal was imperfect. And the death of her children, her husband, and then the extermination of the clan shook her spirit. Ultimately, she died." The room fell back into silence again. All that could be heard was Shikamaru's rattling and disgruntled growls. At the same time, one of the clones in another room found something interesting, and then immediately dispelled, giving a signal to Shikamaru. He was sitting in an office on the second floor with his legs thrown on the table and reading a curious book. When the clone's memories entered his head, he closed the book with a sigh, laid it with the others on a small white scroll, and then folded the seal with one hand. Seal. With cotton, a dozen books disappeared immediately. Having rolled up the scroll, the guy immediately put it in his belt bag and left the office with shining eyes. What he saw from the memories of the clone interested him. He immediately wanted to see it personally. There were still 3 of his clones in the building. He did not bother or recall them, but decided to check everything himself. Going down to the first floor, Shikamaru turned into a room opposite the kitchen. It was a large room, like a living room. Right there, near the center of the fireplace, the clone found something interesting. Getting closer to that very spot, Shikamaru sat down and examined the inside of the fireplace. Surprisingly, it was absolutely clean. There was absolutely no soot, only a little dust accumulated at the very bottom. But it looks like the fireplace has never been used for its intended purpose. It was brand new, lined with gray bricks, almost all of which had the same markings, in slightly light gray ink. They stood out slightly against the gray brick, but it was still difficult to spot them, especially from a distance. Shikamaru came here largely because of this and something else. On this mantelpiece was a white wood clock covered with a lustrous varnish that hadn't even faded over the years. The watch was as good as new, without any scratches or marks. They were as tall as 2 palms and as wide as one. The dial was not numbered, rather instead of numbers there were various incomprehensible Fuin hieroglyphs that Shikamaru could not understand. In addition, the clock apparently opened, but it was on the handle itself that a yellow piece of paper was stuck, along the edges of which were visible strange marks, and in the middle there was a circular Fuin seal. Shikamaru guessed it was a sealing seal, they usually looked the same. But, since his knowledge was terribly scarce, he was not at all sure of this. The printing process was out of the question. This clock rested peacefully on a grey brick mantel and was the only object in the area that clearly stood out and attracted attention. And the room was empty, as was most of the house. Shikamaru suspected that he was simply cleared of unnecessary things and locked up. But, if there was still a barrier here and Kushina talked about it with the third, it was definitely not just that. Shikamaru didn't touch the clock and try to do something stupid, he continued to examine the fireplace. It was clearly not simple, it definitely had some kind of secret or cipher. It remains only to find a clue. After activating the Sharingan, Shikamaru quickly ran across the room, and then carefully examined the fireplace, trying to discern even the slightest clues. 88 exactly. Counting the seals on the bricks, Shikamaru smiled. He finally noticed something. The sizes of the seals were different. It looked like a weird puzzle, going from largest to smallest. Shikamaru quickly found the smallest seal. But then he frowned again. There was nothing special about her, she was just a smaller version of the others. It looked like an 8. Only the shape of this 8 was more flattened, and the edges, which should have been rounded, were sharp like spikes. Frowning, Shikamaru followed the direction of the small seal, it led straight. Maybe, grinning, Shikamaru stepped forward to the fireplace and pressed his hand almost to the very middle, carefully placing his fingers in a certain sequence. Carving a sharp figure 8 out of unsealed bricks. 8 of the 8 bricks have been activated. As soon as Shikamaru's finger touched the latter, the wall suddenly trembled and there was a lingering noise of moving stones. He slowly grew, as if getting closer and closer. After a couple of seconds, on the marked stones, the Fuin symbols light up slightly, and then the bricks slowly began to move in a certain sequence. Some moved inward or to the side, and some, on the contrary, moved forward. In the end, all the bricks took on a completely different shape. Now it was no longer an empty fireplace, everything turned into a low passage to an underground room. All the steps were of exactly the same grey brick. The passage was not very large for just one person. Fuing seals on the stones glowed slightly, some brighter, some dimmer than others, and some even fade away at all. Even so, there were still enough of them to see how deep this tunnel was, and they served as a kind of lamps on the way into the unknown. So this is it. Exhaling, Shikamaru looked around, and then folded the seal formed a shadow clone. Turning back and coming close to the aisle, Shikamaru ordered. Do it again and then guide Naruto while I look around. Shikamaru didn't want to show this place to his friend right away, wanting to check it for traps or dangers. Still, although he was confident in the safety of this place, he was not going to risk it. And the blocking of the Hokage's technique should have been extended just in case. Shikamaru slowly descended the steps, causing the muffled noise of his footsteps to echo throughout. The tunnel was incredibly long, and due to the structure of the walls, the sound was long and drawn out, pumping up the already gloomy atmosphere. A disappeared clan, an abandoned house. Going down to such a place was not the best idea. At the same time, the newly created clone arrived at another clone and again injected chakra into Naruto's body, making sure in advance that the old one was intact. It would fade over time, but if it had already happened, Shikamaru didn't want to make it so obvious in front of the Hokage. Walking down the stairs for almost a minute, Shikamaru thought. Knowing the old man, he certainly will not act rashly and rush here at the slightest danger. Even if he suspects that Naruto and I may be harmed, he will not rush to immediately destroy the barrier. This is not his style. A person who is too insecure could have done just that, but what Raizeenn does best is to endure and wait, even in the worst situation. After all, he is no stranger to taking the blame. The problem is that he will also not be idle for a long time, and a lot of time has passed. He will obviously do something. I took this into account when I walked here. But I did not take into account exactly how he would act. Still, he is not just some small shinobi. Even if I have a past life experience, compared to an old man, I am still a snotty boy, not to mention ninja experience and knowledge of hundreds of techniques that I do not have. A simple learned theory will not help me here. That is why it is necessary to act sharply and for sure, not to leave the old man able to make a move. Blocking his jutsu is not a bad option to prevent him. The telescope technique followed a specific chakra signature. This was both an advantage and a weakness. Therefore, if the chakra is changed or influenced, the technique will naturally be useless. The crystal ball is usually used as an artifact conductor, and in such a situation it cannot do anything. This is inevitable, no matter how experienced the shinobi is in this jutsu. It's like folding hand seals. No matter how much a ninja trains, and you still can't do without them, these are the rules of ninjutsu. Also here. But even so, who knows what this jutsu is capable of in the hands of experienced ninjas. As a last resort, my clone is watching from the shadows. If he does arrive, he will have to act differently. Shikamaru sighed in displeasure. To some extent, he was just doing pointless things. After all, not a single normal ninja would simply hide anything from the Hokage of his village. It was not only stupid, but also unreasonable. Now it looked like creating problems from scratch and a clear demonstration of distrust to Shikamaru. Perhaps that is why he did not want to give Raizeenn direct evidence of his involvement in blocking the technique. The old man must have doubts. Shikamaru had his own views on this strange situation. First of all, he simply did not like surveillance and the fact that others intervene in his affairs, even if it is someone, the kid of the village. Yet even living in the ninja world, he still retained the mentality of the leader of a criminal gang. He was well aware that some information should not be disclosed even to the most trusted people. He still did not believe the old man and acted cautiously. Although he showed himself to be a man of honor and word, and did a lot for the guy, Shikamaru was not one to lose his guard so easily. In addition, the guy did not want Raizeenn to get involved in the case between him and Naruto because of his beliefs and somehow interfered with his plans. Shikamaru did not plan to change or harm Naruto, but still he wanted to force the guy to repay the debt on a certain day, and he simply would not have a chance to refuse when the time came. Therefore, Raizeenn should know as little as possible. The progress was long, but after another couple of minutes, Shikamaru finally descended to the lowest level of the dungeon. It was clearly some kind of secret bunker, otherwise this place cannot be called. The staircase was so long that it seemed as if it led to another world. Probably only Orochimaru has such deep dungeons, if any. Just at that moment, the clone sent to Naruto dissipated, transferring the memories to the original. Shikamaru nodded glumly and waited. Once the clone has finished the job, the other must lead the boy here, and at the same time convey everything he found. It's been almost 20 minutes, we don't have much time. Telescope technique. Suddenly Shikamaru stopped abruptly and frowned seriously. With his abilities, at the moment he could create only 10 clones, having used up all reserves. Therefore, almost always he used no more than half of them. 1 guided Naruto, 2 performed work in the villages, and 2 more remained on guard. But, one of the 2 watching clones dispersed, which meant only one thing: someone had arrived, and it could only be one person. Even memories were not needed to understand everything, from which Shikamaru grinned wryly. So already? Yes, I was surprised. Just then, right in front of the first barrier to the Uzumaki quarter, an old man in baggy clothes appeared. He slowly removed his large hat with the red fire kanji and walked slowly towards the barrier. Raizeenn got tired of waiting and doing nothing. He wanted to at least check the situation. He did not hide and calmly moved in only one direction. When Raizeenn came closer to the barrier, he stopped abruptly, turned to the side and exhaled longly. You're all right, after all. Sitting in the bushes, one of Shikamaru's clones folded the seal and quickly moved to Raizeenn. The old man turned to him and, still smiling calmly, asked, "And why did he leave you here?" "Waiting for guests." The clone smiled innocently and said, "Teacher, I was afraid that we might be followed and decided to play it safe. But, since you are here, then..." Raizeenn squinted at the clone and replied with displeasure, "Shikamaru, you know why I'm here, so you don't need to make a fool of me." The old man shook his head with a sigh. "If you thought to hide the interference in my technique in such a stupid way, then I am disappointed." Then, Raizeenn's gaze suddenly became sharp and he coldly asked, "Shikamaru, I always tried not to put pressure on you and not ask too much, but now? You should tell me everything and don't even think to evade. This question concerns an important secret of the village, now you have no right to remain silent, do you understand?" The clone sighed silently and bowed with a folded fist. "This student understands. But, I ask you to wait a little longer. My main body and Naruto are still there, so..." Raizeenn chuckled and shook his head. "Then hurry up, you don't have more than an hour, do you understand?" "Yes, teacher," with a nod, the clone dispersed in a cloud of smoke. As soon as he disappeared, Raizeenn shook his head and sighed. "This little rascal. Did he leave a clone on purpose? Surely. Who would have followed him besides me? If so, let's see what you will give me something to drink when you show up." With a wave of his sleeve, Raizeenn sat down on the grass and slowly began to light his pipe. At that moment, Shikamaru slowly made his way through the tunnel, which, like the stairs, was illuminated by Fuin seals of light. The guy saw something like this for the first time, but, apparently, these seals had a certain amount of chakra, which was consumed over time, as long as the seal worked. In the vision of the Sharingan, this could be determined. This lighting technique was very handy. But, Shikamaru suspected that this was not her main use. Otherwise, why were these seals activated at the moment of pressing the stones, and why are there so many of them? Perhaps they were responsible for the formation of the structure, and in this structure it was very inconvenient to form light sources, and the seals were very useful. Of course, this was just an assumption. Just as Shikamaru spotted a dark red wooden door ahead, he suddenly stopped and his pupils dilated sharply and then returned to normal. A mass of information quickly filled his mind, which made the guy's eyebrows come together even more. Sighing, Shikamaru took out a cigarette and lit it. After the second puff, he continued on his way again. So he came home. Dad was right, having a dozen methods of interaction for 10 scenarios is pretty good. It was not for nothing that I left the clone. As expected, the old man was distracted by him and stopped. This gave me extra time. Still, he couldn't just burst in here. Breathing out smoke, Shikamaru stopped at the door and thought. Since everything is so, then there is no point in shirking, we will have to chat heart to heart. Well, it's high time. Although, I suppose, my position for which he prepared me may be shaken. Then, in this case, the plan to change the village may be quite viable. I was planning to leave the village in a few years anyway, right after Sajuk. Let's see if this affects the original goals. Breathing out smoke, Shikamaru narrowed his eyes, turned around and listened. Due to the special structure of the tunnel, the sound was reflected so far that even here he heard muffled footsteps in the distance. It was easy to understand that Naruto and his clone were heading here. And pretty quickly. It's good, now we have an hour. I hope the Sharingan will really be able to remember anything. Shikamaru logically assumed that some knowledge was stored here. The Sharingan was the ideal vehicle for learning. But, using it with Naruto was a dubious idea. Naturally, the guy had doubts about the things hidden here. But was it foolish to think that there was a sack of gold or a bill of lading here? Raizeenn probably had a similar one from Naruto's parents, but here there must be something valuable for the Shinobi. Well, if these Shinobi are Uzumaki, then a connection with a Fuin is quite possible. What could be important to a ninja? The answer is obvious: techniques. Therefore, Shikamaru was confident in receiving at least some benefits. He would only need one glance of his eyes to fully memorize information. If Naruto was to enter this place, and Kushina put protection here, then it was definitely not easy. Although, it could also be that something else is stored here. But the question is, what is it? Stopping in front of a dark red door, Shikamaru slowly examined it with his Sharingan. In principle, he did not notice anything particularly dangerous in her. Just a dark red door made of rare wood, with chipped abrasions and veins naturally characteristic of wood. The door was not even varnished, and there were no Fuin seals on it at all, the most ordinary old door. Although, there was a yellowish paper seal right above it. But, Shikamaru still did not notice the dangers. At least for now. It was understandable, even if the seals were hidden there, it would be impossible to see them with the Sharingan. Most seals do not emit chakra, because that was the point of the sealing. For dojutsu owners, encountering them was very dangerous, especially for those who are used to relying on their eyes. It was only possible that a Rinnegan user could see through some Fuin and barrier techniques. But, Rinnegan. for whom are these eyes not a myth? They were good at this, and at the same time caused a lot of problems. True masters of fuinjutsu were rare, because not everyone was given to master this art. Especially now, after the disappearance of the whole clan and all their knowledge. They say that after that day, the legendary fuinjutsu simply disappeared and this type of jutsu as a whole almost completely faded away. Okay, never mind. Without worrying anymore, Shikamaru folded his hand seal and summoned a shadow clone. Still, he didn't really want to risk his life, it would be safer that way. He immediately understood Shikamaru's desire and reached out and grabbed the cracked wooden handle of the door. All the wood looked a little old, but not yet enough to crumble into dust. Therefore, as soon as the clone pulled, with an unpleasant creaking sound, the door began to move, slowly revealing a view of the unknown. Half an hour later, Shikamaru's high expectations have finally paid off. The search was worth it and even the question with the Hokage seemed already insignificant. He was 60% confident that he could find new knowledge of ninjutsu or sealing techniques. This was exactly what he needed so badly in the near future. Desiring to devote himself to the study of Ioryo ninjutsu and Fuin, he was terribly hungry for such knowledge. Even the strong ninjutsu didn't touch him as much as something special, something like that. Shikamaru's greed for glasses simply did not allow them to be spent on things that he was able to study on his own. He even had the opportunity to get 5,000 points for a special task, in which he only had to get a B-rank technique from the Taijutsu category. But even having the opportunity, and although the technique was relatively cheap, he still did not spend it, leaving the expectations at the 8 heavenly gates. Now, he could finally make up for the problems with fuinjutsu, which were almost irreparable even thanks to Raizeenn, and this could very well open up access to new tasks, he was sure of it. The system adjusted to the situation, so this option was quite possible. The place where he ended up turned out to be almost an entire library. There were hundreds of collected scrolls and records of Mito Uzumaki. It was her personal collection and some of which were jutsu created by her personally. It was not difficult to understand that this place belonged to her. Yet most of the scrolls bore her name. Although some parts, Shikamaru still could not open them, they were sealed. But it didn't really matter, Shikamaru saved them for the future. They were among the first to be sealed in a scroll. The place he got to was small. A simple room, no bigger than a living room, with only 3 wardrobes filled with scrolls and rare books. The shelves were in perfect order, and the room itself was very unlike an underground room. The walls were light wood, and a couple of square wooden structures hung from the ceiling, covered with fuin seals. These items gave off such good lighting that it was a bit like sunlight. When Shikamaru entered, they automatically activated and opened a view of this treasury of knowledge. In the middle of the room was a small writing table with neatly folded scrolls, most of which were empty and unrecorded. Other than that, there were writing materials and a few packs of old parchment, a set of brushes, and a few frozen fuin inks. The shelves of scrolls lined the walls, so the room felt a little empty, but quite cozy, especially with a series of photographs right in front of the table. Most of those in the photographs were strangers to Shikamaru. There was a grey-haired old man, just a couple of photographs where his face flashed. Several red-haired people, Mito herself in her youth, in old age, as well as a few more people, but with already dark hair. Some were alone, some surrounded by young Mito and Hashirama. There were children and many more different people. Apparently, most of those depicted here were her family or close friends. You could say that a part of her life in the Leaf Village was depicted on the wall. Shikamaru was even lucky to see the Hokage rock of those times. He did not look around for long. Prior to this, the order in the area quickly turned into a mess after Shikamaru appeared. He didn't waste time studying photographs or looking at shelving. Although he noticed that half of one of them was empty, he did not attach any importance to this, but zealously began to memorize everything that only caught his eye. Shikamaru buried himself in the scrolls and ran his eyes over them with incredible speed, trying to remember all the information. Naturally, he did not even try to understand even a drop of what was written. All he could now was simply to write information into his mind using the unique capabilities of the Sharingan. Only in the future will he be able to sort everything out and use it correctly. Naturally, he was also going to grab some useful scrolls and leave the rest for the future. But he simply had to spend this hour studying. Still, it was pointless to take everything from here and could only cause unnecessary problems. Therefore, while studying, Shikamaru tried, albeit not very successfully, to sort the information and choose the most acceptable for several years in advance for study. A meter away from Shikamaru, 6 of his clones performed a similar action, insanely quickly scanning the text with their eyes. Standing in the direction of Naruto at that moment, was truly amazed. He never thought to find something like that. But, he was rather amazed at another. Just a few minutes ago, Shikamaru told him a lot, about his life, about the past. It was all difficult to digest. Thoughtfully examining the photographs, the guy once again turned over the words of his friend in his head. Earlier, when Shikamaru arrived at the hidden library and looked around, he immediately began to study, even forgetting about Naruto. Just at that moment, the young Jinchuriki and one of Shikamaru's clones finally reached the right place. Shikamaru immediately sensed their approach and his eyes returned to their usual dark color. He already knew that the moment of conversation had come. Could show that the time was not right. But, Shikamaru could no longer pull. Raizeenn was there, and he received all this knowledge thanks to one person. Therefore, despite his greed, he had to fulfill his promise. Not everything, but he has to tell a few things to the guy. Anyway, all of this, Naruto would have known in a few years. Standing up and nodding to the 4 clones, Shikamaru approached Naruto, took a pack of seals from the clone and pointed to the shelves with scrolls. He understood everything without a word. Naruto looked around in amazement, but at that moment Shikamaru's hand interrupted his curious thoughts and questions, landing on his shoulder. Naruto was immediately distracted and his gaze met Shikamaru's serious gaze. This immediately made him nervous. Shikamaru pulled Naruto away from the clones using the power of the eyes, and then asked, "Are you ready?" Naruto blinked in surprise. "What?" Shikamaru glanced at the photographs on the far wall and sighed. "To the truth, of course. You wanted this. You went with me for a reason." Naruto understood immediately and nodded gravely. "I'm ready." "Okay." After checking for the presence of his chakra in Naruto's body, Shikamaru said, "Don't you dare talk about it. The Hokage will definitely not approve of our conversations with you. What I'm going to tell you is a secret village." Leaning on the wall, Shikamaru continued, "Although it's strange to hide such a thing. Well, I'll tell you the basics. This is about the reason why everyone looks at you that way." Noticing the interested gaze of the Jinchuriki, Shikamaru said, "The story is pretty simple, buddy. You are hated because of the so-called demon sealed in your body." "Demon?" Naruto turned a little pale. "Inside me." Why are you so alarmed? Shikamaru chuckled. People call him a demon. Nobody knows his real name. Maybe these fools didn't even think to ask him. Still, when in front of you is a huge creature the size of a mountain, it's somehow not up to chatter, right? Shaking his head, Shikamaru sighed. You can call him the Nine Tails if you like. Now he is your neighbor for a long time, I am sure you have yet to meet. Naruto was silent. He could not believe what he was hearing. Was there a demon hidden in it? Nine Tails. How is this possible? At the same moment, deep in the Jinchuriki's body, behind a huge steel cage, the ancient slumbering beast opened a pair of its bloody eyes and squinted. Everything that Shikamaru said did not hide from the fox. He continued to listen with displeasure. The Nine Tails was rarely interested in the outside world. He was already used to being eternally sealed, and looking at the people he hated so much was clearly not his favorite pastime. He tried to just doze and wait. The current Jinchuriki was caught quite still as a jerk, so the fox managed to influence him. If everything goes as it should, then one day, the Nine Tails was sure that he would free himself from this vile vessel. But, nevertheless, sometimes the fox was distracted from hibernation and watched something interesting. Today was just a similar case. The Uzumaki Quarter. Perhaps this fox clan hated as much as the Uchiha or Senju. It was the damn Uzumaki who sealed it, 3 times. The fox was here in the past with Mito, but now everything was different. In this place now there was only death. Uzumaki had come to an end, which undoubtedly made him happy. Lies even slightly improved his spirits when he looked at photographs of many familiar people, who are now most likely being devoured by worms, and from some of them there was nothing left at all. The clan that captured him got what they deserved. Quite grinning, Kurama continued to listen to this curious boy, Shikamaru Nara. He found this brat rather interesting. Fox has seen a bunch of annoying kids in his life, but this one clearly wasn't a kid at all. The Nine Tails was sure, no matter how you look, but this is not a child, something was wrong in him. Moreover, when it came to the Baijuer, the guy behaved too unusual. The Nine Tails continued to watch. Shikamaru turned to Naruto and said, "Nobody forced these people to use the fox for their own purposes. His anger is understandable, but here's how you react." With a wry smile, Shikamaru paused, and then said, "A few years ago, the fox broke free and threw out his anger by destroying part of the village and killing many people. In those days, your father and mother died." From the look of Naruto, Shikamaru felt a little uncomfortable, but he decided to finish what he started. "They died defending the village." Naruto's expression changed slightly, but he didn't react too harshly. But in his gaze, a strong sadness clearly flashed. The Jinchuriki lowered his head and fell silent. Shikamaru raised his head and looked up at the ceiling. "I feel sorry for Naruto. But if it becomes easier for you, I can say that you can still meet your parents." "What?" Naruto lifted his head in amazement and stared at his pensive friend. Shikamaru let out a long breath and nodded. "I am not kidding. You've seen what ninjutsu is capable of. I can say that there are those who will even allow you to see the dead and call them into our world. It's difficult, but I think it's real. It's just." Shikamaru decided not to finish making sacrifices for the likes of jutsu. "You have to pay for everything." There were already enough words. At least he said everything he wanted to say. He could not tell about the fourth and everything connected with him. But, at least the guy had the right to know about this, he deserved it. Shikamaru had acquired so much knowledge that he had to repay him. Although it was not enough, and Naruto, in fact, did not recognize almost anything, but it was enough for now. If the guy is smart, then he will find everything himself, and Shikamaru did not want to talk too much, especially about Minato. Relieved, Shikamaru decided to leave Naruto alone with his own thoughts, while he continued to study the scrolls and memorize everything that is written in them. Once again making sure of the correctness of his choice of the Sharingan. If not for these eyes, which make it possible to perfectly remember everything photographically, now he would not have received so much. It would only be necessary to rely on the sealing of all these scrolls and slow familiarization in the future. However, now he only remembered them outwardly, without even understanding. The set time limit passed pretty quickly. During this time, Shikamaru looked through all the scrolls and sealed some of them in his personal scroll. Although it was not necessary to take something with him, he decided to endure some knowledge, they could come in handy. Having original manuscripts has always been helpful. In addition, some still had chakra, which could help in learning. The guy has already noticed the basics with which to start learning. And there was one strange scroll that was impossible to print. Shikamaru was especially interested in him. After all, after receiving it, even the system reacted by issuing another task. Search. Print the Uzumaki Mito scroll. Having recovered from the mass of information after dispelling the clones, Shikamaru left everything here as it is and taking Naruto quickly left the dungeon. There was nothing else to catch. Naruto was still arriving in his own mind. Now he knew why everyone hated him so much. He understood the reason for all these cold looks. Most importantly, he now knew what had become of his parents. The creature that killed them was inside him. He did not understand at all what to do now. Shikamaru decided not to bother the guy anymore and leave him. He has already, and so, heaped up things, history will definitely go the other way. He didn't really want to aggravate everything even more. And things were more important now. When the guys left the old residence, they immediately stumbled upon an old man bored to the side. He was standing right behind the barrier with his hands behind his back. Raizeenn stood with his back to the guys and looked at the slowly darkening sky. He didn't even turn when he said, "Naruto, go home, I'll come to you later, we have something to talk about." Shikamaru stay. In any other situation, the guy could start asking questions or even be surprised at the arrival of the old man, but now, his mood was not very good. The boy simply nodded and slowly trudged home. Shikamaru was silent. The Hokage also made no sound. Even when Naruto was out of sight, the old man stood quietly, watching the clouds floating across the sky. Shikamaru left the barrier and stood near him and also looked up to the sky. Now the guy's thoughts were in a slight disarray due to the huge pile of information. But the sight of the slowly drifting snow-white clouds calmed his mind a little. If the Hokage was silent for so long, it was clearly not good. Shikamaru naturally knew that he might have done something recklessly hasty now. But remembering the presence of a bunch of new fuinjutsu, he firmly understood that the choice was the right one and the risk was worth it. Raizeen's suspicions are unlikely to cause him to act too excessively. But now, the mistrust will definitely be even stronger than before. Plus, Shikamaru was having a hard time understanding what this old man was thinking. Silence and a light breeze brought peace, but at the same time, some anxiety. Only, Shikamaru was not a child, such an atmosphere did not affect him at all. An ordinary child probably would not have resisted and would have started trying to justify himself or at least somehow resolve the situation. He just waited. After another couple of minutes, Raizeenn chuckled as usual slyly and shook his head. I don't know how to explain it, but you raise a lot of suspicion. Your behavior and actions are not childish tricks and self-indulgence. I used to doubt it, but now I am sure of it. To use the boy for his own purposes, a real Shinobi would do this, but... Throwing a studying glance at Shikamaru, Raizeenn said. Children always ask questions, in this troubled world they are looking for themselves and their way. What's your path, Shikamaru? Shikamaru was still studying the clouds, not paying attention to Raizeenn's attentive gaze. Now, having heard his question, for the first time in a long time, he did not know what to answer. On the one hand, he considered himself a Shinobi, and quite successful and talented. He understood all its advantages and realized the benefits of the system, coupled with knowledge of the history of the future. But to realize his own path and walk along it, he did not yet understand how to do it, and what, in general, this is, his own path. The way of the ninja of others was easier to understand, but finding your own is a completely different problem. Shikamaru wanted to know and study everything about this world, he was really interesting to him. He wanted to become incredibly strong and gain power, just like before. The one who has the power and authority is able to control his own destiny. Shikamaru has always strived for independence. But, calling it the ninja's own way was difficult. It was more of a goal, nothing more. The desire to learn everything and explore, isn't this the same path that Orochimaru took? Realizing this, Shikamaru chuckled wryly and finally met the old man's gaze. Do you think I will go the same way as your last student? Raizeenn chuckled and looked away. Talented ninjas always act unexpectedly, it is difficult to understand and predict which path they will choose. Orochimaru was one of those, he was different, but changed. Now you. I can't understand you, I thought I could, but it looks like I was wrong. Then with him, I did not realize it in time, and then it was too late. Sighing, Raizeenn turned to the student and said. Listen to Shikamaru, you must promise me that you will stop meddling in the affairs of the village until you become a jonin. Keep your head down, now is not the time, you still have many years ahead of you to prove yourself. You don't have to twist behind my back and turn something like today's. You did a good job, but you have to understand, Naruto is your comrade, and I am still the head of this village and your teacher. This should not happen again. Shikamaru nodded calmly. I understood. Okay, the old man nodded. What did you say to Naruto? What do you even know? Shikamaru paused for a moment, then replied with a sigh. I don't know much, but I know about the Jinchuriki, and who is sealed in Naruto. I thought that he must know why everyone treats him this way. Raizeenn frowned and Shikamaru added. I don't know why you did this, it's none of my business. But Naruto helped me, I helped him. Plus, I think it will be for the best for him. It will get stronger and... Enough. Raizeenn waved his hand and turned away, staring at the sky again. I understand you. The guy is really doing well, you are great. But, you have to understand, if he now knows that he is sitting inside him, this can affect him and affect him not for the better. Although... The old man sighed and shook his head. To be honest, I myself do not know what will come of it. To tell the truth or not, I've thought about it more than once. But, he is still a child, the time will come, and of course I will explain everything to him. Until then, Shikamaru, stop it all. You understood me. From the Hokage's serious gaze, Shikamaru could only nod in agreement. In any case, he got everything he wanted, he was not going to talk about anything anymore. Although, of course, he was pleased that the old man did not inflate an unpleasant problem out of this. At this point, already about to leave, Shikamaru was stopped by the same serious voice of Raizeenn. This time, my dear student, I will not interrogate you strongly or punish you for such tricks. Let's consider this a small task. But, you will prepare a progress report. Tell me everything you found there. Now I will watch you more closely, you must understand this. Moreover, you have to give me your word that you will stop implicating children, especially Naruto, in your plans. Shikamaru stopped and nodded briefly without turning his head. I understood the teacher, then he turned around, bowed and immediately disappeared from his place. Left alone, Raizeenn let out a long sigh. A light breeze gently shook the hem of his cloak and hat, after which the old man looked up at the sky again and muttered, I hope I'm doing the right thing. At the same time, Shikamaru finally left the second barrier and entered the flat, rocky road of the village. The Hokage's situation was very unusual. While this was one of the expected options, Shikamaru believed things would turn out a little differently. But, at the same time, this option was one of the main probable ones. It was also possible to draw conclusions from it. Apparently, the old man decided to make me his student and started talking about the future Hokage in my role just for the sake of checking. All this is clearly not just that. Previously, I could not be sure for sure, and my father behaved strangely, but now I am sure that the old man is studying me. Fortunately, he is not Danza, he has not yet begun to act. He would have tried to re-educate me long ago in the direction necessary for the village. Raizeenn is more sentimental. He wants to see if I become the problem of the village to deal with, or become useful. It seems that even my father is taking part in this matter. When playing shogi with me, all his questions usually boil down to probing the ground. Unpleasant. Walking along the road, Shikamaru frowned with displeasure. If everything is so, there is reason to believe that they both have suspicions about my identity. Probably, I am too insolent and behave very unusual. I thought it would not be noticed, because I am from the Nara clan, and even a Shinobi, early growing up could be justified, but now? Could it be that even my father doubts me? If so, then I am in an unpleasant position. On the one hand, Danza, who can make a move at any moment, and this despite the fact that he does not know about all my powers, including the Sharingan. On the other hand, Raizeenn. Shikamaru sat down on the bench and threw back his head, exhaling heavily. Now he was thinking intensely about the consequences and where everything could lead. Now it was worth drawing conclusions and revising some plans. Choice. Now, thanks to his position, he could quite win the heart of one of them using their abilities and knowledge. Except, it didn't really interest him. Having appeared in this world, everything looks many times more beautiful than in the past while reading manga or watching anime. Perhaps this was due to merging in a new body, or something else. Everything here is quite real, so the girls are more beautiful. But, Shikamaru never got into a particularly serious relationship. He was one of those who did not mind having several women and enjoying their company. In many ways, this was one of the reasons why several factions challenged him. For at least a couple of old men from these factions, Shikamaru has stripped his daughters of their innocence in the past and then abandoned them. Not that his relationship with women was that bad, but rather he did it just out of boredom or profit. Now, on the one hand, part of his thoughts was not against influencing the girls and taking advantage of their position in the future. All of them will become strong kunoichi, so it would not be so bad to have a relationship with them. But, on the other hand, he understood that now they are just children and not even members of the family of his rivals. Moreover, he changed after death. Now he wished to be more restrained in some matters, at least for now, as long as everything was going well. On the other hand, the beauty and desire to possess such beautiful women would surely be desirable for any man, and Shikamaru was no exception. He was one of those who loved to enjoy the beauty of women and might be inferior in Jiraiya's perverted thoughts, but he was not that far from him. At least he was a hidden pervert and would never refuse the opportunity to watch the beauties in the bath. There would be a time. Possession of the Bakugan in this situation was welcome. But, of course, over the years, Shikamaru has learned the lesson: first work, then enjoyment. You should always think with your head, and not in another place. The situation is similar here. He did not want to interfere and adjust situations by deceiving. He did not want to hurt the girl because of his selfishness. Therefore, being alone was also a good option. Now, thinking about it, he even felt a little better. Yes, if I am destined to find a beauty in this world, then let it happen not by my will, but by chance or karma. Sakura, Hinata, Ino, they are all my type and have perfect looks. One is gentle and calm, the other is hot-tempered and charming, the third is beautiful and playful. And, these are only girls of my generation from Konoha. Remember, for example, Tsunade or Kushina, their beauty is on a different level. The world is huge, spreading into a bawdy grin, imagining the forms of beauties. Shikamaru involuntarily lit a cigarette and relaxed. The unnecessary thoughts have now completely disappeared. He decided to surrender in the matter of the future girl to chance. After all, he understood that he did not possess such good qualities. Now at least he strives for strength, and not having strength, how can you desire a relationship with someone? Besides, the age is not right. If so, he no longer worried. Slowly getting up from the bench, Shikamaru slowly trudged home. I will wait a couple of years at the academy, where we will decide what to do next. Now we need to survive the Uchiha massacre and prepare. For the first time, we have Guy and the gate training. I'm finally ready. A week later. When the sun disappeared behind the horizon and only hundreds of stars, led by the brightest moon, began to illuminate the world, Shikamaru returned home, barely moving his legs. Today, he finally achieved what he wanted. He finally learned the B-rank minimum special Taijutsu and completed the old quest. The 8 Heavenly Gate was difficult to classify, but the system accepted this jutsu and the reward was received. Unfortunately for Shikamaru, he could not receive the special award, which he was counting on very much, or rather, he could, but not for what he hoped for. In his opinion, Guy's technique was at least A rank, so the reward must match, and this, not to mention the forbidden form of technique. But, unfortunately, there was no special reward for this. True, there was a reward for the deadline, which made Shikamaru a little better. The deadline was completed up to 10 years, and this turned out to be a hidden condition. Along the way of Taijutsu was exactly the task that Shikamaru was already ready to complete for a very long time. He just did not buy the necessary techniques and did not study them. Now he has finally succeeded, though not without terrible difficulties. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also make sure you tell me your recommendation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.